What's going on, everybody? It's Freedo here for Your Overwatch. This time we're breaking down a bit of a slippery subject that we're going to label the multiple meta problem. This video almost is a meta video about metas, a guide video on how to view Overwatch guides. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're listening to things that we say on this channel, or breakdowns of how the pros play, or what other YouTubers say, it all needs to be put in its proper place in context. For instance, we've already spoken about how different console plays compared to PC, but there's also other parameters that can widely affect the game experience, and I want to break those down for you here, at least a few examples, so that you can better navigate the advice that you hear from ourselves or others to better fit your experience. I think platform is one of the more obvious ones, as on console the meta plays completely differently, so that would go into a case of its own, and a huge part of that is due to the input devices. Eddie explained this really well in a few videos recently, so I won't go on too much farther on this point, but instead let's talk about the effect that skill can have in changing the meta. We all look up to the pro side of play, and theoretically speaking, the highest level of play puts the maximum amount of skill and synergy into the game possible, which creates a whole separate meta from every other aspect. The best hero in all of Overwatch that I can think of to explain this is McCree. At the top levels of play, McCree is a powerhouse. If you can hit over half of your shots, a lot of them being in the head, putting out massive, reliable DPS, you can see how a character like Pharah can be completely removed from the meta, because with a discorded McCree, even with his range nerf, she still is really hard to play. Top level McCrees are just simply that good. But if we scale down to just a slightly below pro level even, players that sometimes might have pro level performances but their consistency isn't there, which I think is where a lot of upper ranked players fit, you can start to see how McCree can have a massive drop off. So quote unquote rules that get made about who's in the meta right now change drastically. At the top levels of play, it might be safe to assume that you simply can't compete with a soldier on your team. You should have McCree because he has better output, and if the other team is a McCree and you're running a soldier as your hit scan DPS, your team's just simply going to do worse because McCree has a better output potential. But as we scale down the ranks and play at a slightly lower skill tier, the enemy's team's McCree shouldn't be outputting a pro level amount of productivity. So that might mean the reliability of soldier might even be better in that context. And it's this problem that we typically on this channel don't try to define the meta for the rest of you, because we know we have a lot of console fans that it doesn't apply to entirely. We have a wide array of skill tiers that watch our videos, and more important than dictating to you what I see at the top levels of play, because I do watch every pro match, I think it's far more useful to enable you with the skills to perceive the game on your own terms, so that you can develop as a player within your own context. The other area that I would say this drastically affects things is Blizzard's approach to balancing. And I think the most important rule of all is to not have an expectation of parity among the classes. We should not be looking at the highest levels of play and expect for the same hero usage statistics as at every other level of play, because some heroes simply, in their mechanics and value alone, aren't going to be able to compete with a hero that can get much more value with more skill put in. If you're playing against opponents that either don't know how to or can't physically counter a Bastion or the tactics of Symmetra teleporters, they can decimate the enemy team. But the more skilled you get in the game, those tactics start to fall off. And I think actually it's more healthy for us to expect this to be the case, rather than trying to change everything to always fit in every context. Back to the McCree example, the value put out from a character that hits all 6 McCree revolver shots is completely different from a lower skilled player that can only hit 1 or 2 shots. And maybe I can outline an example for you to show you how the rubber hits the road with this. If you're playing McCree and a Winston jumps you, he's jumping around with his monkey Tesla cannon, he doesn't really have to aim, and he's burning you down. Is your aim good enough to hit multiple headshots on him to eliminate him? Or are you going to hit more like 2 out of 6 and more or less die for free? The difference between value and that is massive. And if your aim isn't that good, but you can kind of track on targets and are good at putting out the reliable damage of soldier, well, you can just drop that health pack down and at least you'll get Winston about half, have to reload and probably need some teammate help, but at least you'll be outputting more value than a McCree who has skill shots that are harder to hit. These examples go on, and we'll try our best in order to give advice that is applicable to all levels of play, but ultimately we can't. We try to give advice from the perspective of competency with characters, but some battles are really hard and nuanced to describe. A lot of times people say that Junkrat is a good counter to Tracer and Genji. Granted, he does get caught in his trap now, rather than being able to slash through it, but at most levels of play, Tracer and Genji should be able to evade Junkrat's nades and reliably beat him, let's say, 6 or 7 times out of 10. But in open space, when they're battling each other, the mobile character should win out. But at the same time, at the ESL 1 Atlantic Showdown, Rogue picked triple DPS on Anubis against the dive comp because Tavik is just so good at projectiles, he can use Junkrat on defense and hit those insane shots with tracers blinking around everywhere. So it's interesting how these metas actually shift from one way to another. At lower levels of play, if Tracer can't dodge, then Junkrat's trap might win, most of the time. As the tracers start to improve and the player's projectiles aim sort of level out, Tracer starts to win that fight again. But at the maximum skill range, those projectile players are so good that it's more of an even matchup, and based purely on who outplays who at the given time. With this being said, it's impossible to balance and it's impossible to give uniform advice. So the conclusion of this video is we all have to be critical thinkers when applying our reasoning to this game. There's far too many variables to make set rules about each character. There's general principles like a Winston's good against Genji, but if your Winston isn't that good and their Genji's good, he might stay out of arm's reach and be able to triple headshot you with no problem. So we find the best way to describe these things is more of a mid-skill level, competent approach. Not purely from the perspective of the mechanical gods, and not purely from the perspective of people who just started the game and don't understand why Bastion is allowed to just rip through their entire team. Surely that's OP! Well, until you learn the counters to it. With that being said, when we make these videos, it puts us in the middle of everybody, where some people say all our advice is obvious, and other people say our advice doesn't apply to them. But the good news is I think over time, we can develop sort of a baseline understanding of principles and counterplay. For instance, it seems a huge percentage of the community doesn't understand the value of Winston. Winston could be a dominant hero, yet you see a lot of posts that his ultimate is one of the worst in the game. I think the best approach for you guys is to acknowledge your own skill tier, understand the context of where you're playing, what platform, what skill rating, and try your best to translate the information from all the different sources into a way that works for you. Understand that there isn't set rules for the entire game, but general principles that you can apply and bend into the given contexts that you're in. I hope this cleared things up. A little bit too theoretical maybe, but I hope it made sense and was valuable to you. I also want to point out that we still are adding and trying out diamond level players. We got like 2,000 comments in the last video when I mentioned that we were adding people. Holy moly, if you need friends to add, skim through those comment sections. You also can click the link to our Discord in the description to network with other people in our community. But if you are a diamond player, you can go ahead and add me. My Battletag is linked in the description. And if you left a comment in the last video, I may have already added you, but accidentally on the NA region. I went through like 1,000 comments and then realized I didn't sign into EU where we want to be playing. So check both regions. I may have already even sent you an invite. That's been it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button. It really does help us out. You can subscribe for more content. We upload each and every day. We stream 5 to 7 days of the week on Twitch when our videos go live. Be sure to follow us on Twitter where you can see our stream updates, as well as other cool things that we post. My personal favorite is a Twitch highlight where I accidentally nano boosted Mercy twice in 2 minutes. Mwah! Quality Overwatch content, that is. That's been it for me. I've been Freedo for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.